Hello guys, welcome back. In this video we will try to understand what is block scope in JavaScript. And yeah, so let's get into the video. And so here I've created a file block scope, and as usual in index.html I linked the block scope file. So let's start. So we know variables can be declared by using two keywords. One is let and the other one is const, right? And there is another keyword is also there, which is where. So I'm not discussing that as of now, so in future we see. So we declare variables by using let and const. So let and const variables, whenever we declare variables with let and const, like let's say let a equal to 20, and these variables which are declared by using the keywords let and const, we say them as block scoped variables. So the variables whichever are declared by using let or const keywords, we call those variables as block scoped variables. Let us try to understand why we call those variables as block scoped. So before that, you need to know what is block. A block is something which is, this curly braces one. So for some examples, if statement. So when we write a if statement, we use this block, right? If and then condition, and then we write the block. And then when we write while loop, let's say, and there also the same thing, we write the curly braces like this. So this is again a block, and here is again a block, and similarly in for loop also. So this is again a block, right? And else if is there and else is there, so all these we call as blocks. And functions are not called as blocks, functions are contexts, because in the last lecture we have seen that functions will have their own brand new execution contexts. So those are context and these are blocks. Okay, just understand the difference. Even though when we declare a function, right, like this, so we have the curly braces there also, but we won't call that as a block. We call that as a for context level. Okay, so let's not involve that functions here. So blocks means the for loop, while loop, and then if statement. And now similarly, like how we discussed like global and local, similarly there is something called block level. So the lines of code which is present inside a block, we call that line is present in the block. So something like this. Let's say if I write the condition to be something like true, and here if I write a statement saying console.log hello. So now this line number 5 is present inside the if statement or inside the if block. So this line number 5 is block level now. So the line of code which is 5, line number 5 is block level. That means it's in the block. We say it is in the block. That's it. So now you understand what is block means. Let's try to see. So let us try to we know that JavaScript will get executed sequentially. So that point is very important to understand all this. And one more thing is like you need to know about three things. So the first thing is what is undefined. So let a, when I declare and when I print variable a, what will happen? Will it print some value or will it print nothing? Basically, when we declare variables in JavaScript, but we don't assign any values, like here you see, if I assign some values, so definitely the 10 will get printed here. But when we don't assign any values, internally what will happen is those variables will be assigned with undefined value. So undefined is a data type in JavaScript. Okay, so now if I print, you see it prints undefined at line number 5, and it's not an error. Undefined is not an error, it's just a normal execution, and undefined is a data type it is. So when we don't assign any value to a variable, then that variable will be given undefined value by the JavaScript engine. Okay, now coming to another thing where we declare a variable after we use it. Like here if you see, so at line number 2 I'm trying to print a variable a, but I have created that variable at line number 3, and we know JavaScript will get executed sequentially. So line number 1 will get executed first and then line number 2, right? So when line number 1 gets executed, JavaScript does not know what is a. So that's why what it will do is it will throw an error saying that cannot access a before its initialization. So let me save, and you see here it throws an error saying that cannot access a before its initialization, because the initialization of a is done at line number 2, but we are utilizing it at line number 1 only. Actually JavaScript knows it, but in the future session we will see something called hoisting, so at that place we will discuss about it. But for now you can assume it to be that variables cannot be accessed before before their initialization. So here initialization is line number 2 and we are accessing it in line number 1. That should not be done, so that's why it is throwing an error. And another thing is that the third thing, so we have seen undefined and we have seen cannot access variable before its initialization. And the third thing is when there is no variable and we try to access that variable. So here there is no variable in the file which is named as a, and still we are trying to print that variable a. So in this case what will happen is it will throw an error saying that variable a is not defined. Let me save, and you see it shows a is not defined. So now you understand the difference, right? Undefined is just a data type. That's not an error. Whereas not defined is an error. Not defined we will get only when the variable is not there but we try to access it. So that's what not defined is. Enough. Now moving on to block scoping. So if I create a variable a with a value of 90, and if I create an if statement just to have some lines of code inside the block, and here if I log a here, do you know what will happen? Like at line number 2, first line number 2 gets executed, and where it creates a variable a with a value of 90, and then line number 3 will get executed and condition is true, so we enter into it. So line number 4 will also get executed, and at line number 4 it's printing a value. So a value is already created which is 90, so it will print 90. So that's what we expect, and if I save, what the same output we get. But do you know how does this happens internally? Do you know how does this happens internally? Let me show you. So we know what is call stack, right? Let me draw the call stack diagram here. So in the call stack, whenever we run the JavaScript file, what will happen at the very bottommost, a global execution context gets created, right? So at the very bottommost, global execution context got created. Now in this global execution context, the code will execute sequentially. So line number 2 is in global, so a variable a be declared and within this global execution context with a value of 90. Okay, and then at line number 3 condition is true, and at line number 4 variable a we are printing, and variable a is of course this printing line number 4 is also in the global, so it's going to print 90 in the console. Okay, so 90 will be printed, so that's what we expected. So let me take another scenario. So what if I declare the variable a here and try to print it outside? So make the same analysis like the sequential analysis and think for the answer. So this time what should happen? Firstly, at line number 1 the condition is true, we enter into it, variable a be declared, and then at line number 4 we are printing a, so a should print, in this line it should print 90. And let me also have another variable here which is 100 b, just like that. Nothing specific, just like that I created a variable just to show you how does this happens. So we expect 90 here, and let's see what is the output. So let me save, and you see we get an error that a is not defined. And when do we get this error? When the variable is not present. So here during this execution of line, JavaScript is encountered with an error saying that not defined. JavaScript did not find the variable a. Let's understand why it did not find it. So basically what happens is, when we run this file in the global execution context, line number 1 be executed first, which is the declaration of variable b with a value of 100, and line number 2 the condition is true, so line number 3 gets executed, and at line number 3 a will be declared with a value of 90. And then after line number 3 4 and then 5, at 5 we are printing it, right? When we are printing it, it should print 90. So that's what we expect regularly, but that does not happen because we are making a wrong analysis here. Why? Because when we enter into a block of code means, I told you what is block means. Whenever we enter into a block of code, what will happen is a box will be created for it. a block box will be created for it. Box means not the context that I discussed. Block means it will be declared within the same context only. Let me show you. So when line number 1 is executed, it will create variable b with a value of 100. That's fine. And the control moves to line number 2, and line number 2, that statement is true. So what should happen? We will enter into the if block. So here there will be a block or box gets created, and then the control moves to inside that block and line number 3. So at line number 3, variable a is declared. So variable a will be declared with a value of 90. Okay, and this variable a, see here very carefully, I'm not declaring outside this block, but I'm declaring inside this block because the line number 3 is a block level statement. That means it's present inside the block. And now what is after line number 3? The control moves on to line number 4, and at line number 4 it's the closing brace. So whenever we encounter with the closing brace, that's the end of that block. So much like in the context, what we did when the function ends, we erased it from the call stack, right? Similarly, when block is also ended, then we should erase that block from the call stack, just like this. And after erasing, the control will move on to line number 5. So at line number 5, we are trying to print a variable a. Now you see, is there a variable a within this context? Is there a variable a within this context? No. So when a variable a is not there, what should it do? It will print an error saying that a is not defined. So that's what it did. You see, that's what it did. Okay. Now let's try to take another difficult example so that we can understand. I'll remove this line, and then here I'll have another true statement, if statement, and inside I'm going to have another variable a with a value of 88, and then here I am going to print a plus b, and then here I am going to print b minus a, just like this. Okay, now let's try to understand how does this code will behave, and in the global execution context. So execution will start from line number 1. So at line number 1, it's the declaration of variable b. So variable b we declared with a value of 100 within the global execution context. Basically all these lines are global only, because there is no functions involved here. And after line number 1, what will happen? The control will move on to line number 2, and in line number 2 the condition is true. So what should happen? A block should get created for it, something like this. So let me draw this block, and then we enter into the block which is at line number 3. So now this declaration of a is present inside this block. So a will be declared inside this block with a value of 90. So we are at line number 3, right? And this line number 3 is a declaration of a with value of 90, and then once it is done, the control moves on to line number 4. And here is another block again. So since it is another block, what should happen? Another block should get declared because the condition is true, right? So another block will be created just like this, and then we will enter into that block, basically line number 5. So at line number 5, again a variable declaration which is 88. So the variable a will be declared with a value of 88 like this, where inside this blue block, because we are inside that only. And after line number 5, line number 6. So at line number 6, it's the printing a plus b. So we need to compute a plus b first before we print. So what is a plus b? So we need to check for the variables first. So what is a? A is a variable. Is there a variable a within this block? That means within the blue block. Yes, a is there. What's the value of it? 88. So it will grab that 88. And then is there a variable b within this block? No. So since the variable is not there in a block, what should it do? It should throw an error saying that b is not defined, but it won't do that, because when the variable is not present in a block, JavaScript engine will search for that variable in its parent block. That means for this blue block, the parent block would be the outer environment. That means the outer block where the blue block is present. So that means this one is the outer block. So in this outer block, JavaScript engine will search for the variable b, and even in that block also the variable b is not there. So what will it do? Again it will search in its parent, and in its parent means this one, basically the root block. And in the root block, is there a variable b? Yes. What's the value of it? 100. So it will access that 100 from there. So the summation would be 188. So 188 is the first output, and it's not an error as we expected, because when variable is not present in a block, JavaScript engine will search for that variable in its parent block. Even in its parent block also, if it don't find, then it will search in its parent block recursively, and so on until it finds. When it not find in the uppermost block also, then it will throw the error saying that that variable is not defined. Okay, and now you see the control moves on to line number 7. So at line number 7, you see closing brace of this blue block. So what should happen? Blue block should get erased. Blue block should get erased just like this. Right, now the control moves on to where? Moves on to line number 8. And line number 8, this line of code is present inside this block, basically this inner block. And here what I did, I'm printing something called b minus a. What is b and what is what is a? So b minus a, right? B means the variable b. Search for the variable b within that block. So is there a variable b within that block? No. So what should it do? It will search in its parent. So in its parent there is a variable b which is having a value to be 100. So it will get that 100 from there. And then minus a. What is a? So is there a variable a within this block? Yes. What is that value? 90. So a will be accessed from this block only. So 100 minus 90. So which will be 10. So that's the second output. And then once this is also done, the control moves on to line number 9, which is the closing brace of this inner block. So that means the inner block should get erased just like this. And once this is also done, the control comes out to 10, line number 10. So from line number 10 there is nothing. So in the global execution context there is nothing. So global execution context be just erased just like this. So that's the end of the program. So the output of our output would be 188 and then 10. Let me show you. I'll save this. And you see we get 188 and 10 to be the outputs. So this is what a block scoped variable says. So the main point is variables which are declared with let or const keyword can be accessed within that block or in its inner blocks. Okay, like the variables that are declared inside this block can be accessed within this area only. Like in its inner blocks also we cannot access, but in its outer block we cannot access. So that's the block scope. That's the definition of a block scope variables is the access of a variable will be within that block only. We cannot access outside that block. And one more thing is, when the variable is not present in a block, JavaScript engine will search for that variable in its outer blocks until it finds. If it does not find in uppermost block, then it will throw an error saying that that variable is not defined. I hope you understand this concept, and in the next videos we will see some more concepts in JavaScript. Thanks for watching. If you like the video content, and please do subscribe. Thank you.